I'm Hadid from Forever Studio, and today I'm going to show you how I made the Salt Cellar. These are typically the first things to go at our markets. I really enjoy making them, plus it doesn't require a giant lumber haul. I'm using this olive wood turning blank that I got from Woodcraft. I'm using my table saw to cut the lid because my bandsaw only has a 3-inch cutting capacity. I do multiple shallow passes, raising the blade up slightly each pass. Then I run both pieces through the drum sander so that they're nice and smooth and sit flat on top of each other. Once they're nice and flat, I stack them on top of each other and make sure that the grain is continuous. Then I add a piece of double-sided tape there to keep them together so that I could get ready to cut out the main shape. I found some random circular shaped item in my shop and I used that to trace out a circle. And then I took that to the bandsaw and I cut out this teardrop shape. I'm not the best with the bandsaw, but what I could say is go slow and take your time. As long as you get it close enough to the shape, you could clean everything up with some sanding. While the lid and the base are still attached, I take that to the drill press and I drill a hole about halfway into the base. I do this while they're still attached to make sure that the dowel aligns properly without shifting the lid and offsetting it. Then I flip the whole thing over and I start carving out the shape of the base. This is really just a matter of personal preference, but I personally like this look over just keeping it flat. I just keep removing small amounts of material going all around the piece until I'm happy with the overall shape. It looks a little rough at first, but obviously it could all get cleaned up with some good sanding. And now for my favorite part, adding a nice carved detail to the lid to make this piece really stand out. I started out with using this 1/4-inch shank teardrop burr by Sabertooth, but because this piece is pretty small, I quickly moved to an 1/8-inch shank eye cutter with my Dremel tool to kind of create a little bit more detail. If you're not familiar with Sabertooth products, they have multiple grit burrs. The yellow indicates fine grit, green indicates coarse. They also have an orange, which is medium, and my personal favorite, the whisper burrs, which are white. Those are the ultra fine, but they also remove material pretty quickly. Sometimes I get so laser focused in the carving that I forget where I am, and the smallest things startle me. Like here, where I got startled by my husband literally just showing up in front of the window. Anyway, this is the part where I detach the lid from the base so I could start carving out the compartment portion where the salt or the rings, whatever it is that you're putting in here, is going to go. Also, can we take a minute to appreciate the grain on this olive wood? It's one of my favorites. So let's get this in the vise and start carving. I'm using the sphere burr by Kutzall, not really sure how to pronounce that, but I take shallow passes going all around until I am happy with the shape. Again, shallow passes, light pressure, that's going to keep the burr from kicking back at you, and it's going to give you more control. Moving on to this little knob, I drilled out a hole with my drill press into a scrap piece of walnut, glued a dowel in there, and now I'm just shaping out the knob. I'm basically trying to get it as close to a sphere as possible. It looks really awkward right now, kind of like a piece of chocolate. Then I stick the dowel end into the drill press and I keep sanding with a really coarse grit sandpaper just to kind of finalize the shape. When I'm happy with the shape, then I start going up the grits just to make sure it's nice and smooth. I started with 40, I went to 60, 80, 120, 220, 320. And it looks like this. To get the lid to move freely around the dowel, I roll up a small piece of sandpaper and I fit that through the hole of the lid. I start using these fancy moves to twirl the lid around the sandpaper until it's a little bit wider and can move freely around the dowel without catching. I skipped all the sanding stuff because that's boring. Nobody wants to watch that. And I'm showing you that I'm water popping after I've sanded to 220. Once it's dry, I sand lightly again with the 320 grit. I'm using some CA glue in the hole in the base, and then I'm threading the lid through and putting the dowel right in there. And the final step is adding finish. I'm using this hard wax oil by a company that I can't really recommend. I just think there's better products out there. It's not a bad product, it's just not my favorite. But it's completely food safe, which is something I prioritize when I'm making items that could likely make contact with food. Also, hard wax oils are generally pretty easy to apply. It's a pretty foolproof method, which is another reason I tend to gravitate towards using them. You typically apply whatever amount, wipe off the excess, and then wait about 20 minutes to an hour depending on the manufacturer's instructions. Then once you've waited the appropriate amount of time, you buff your piece and make sure it's nice and smooth. And once you've buffed your piece, you are finally done, and here is the finished product. I hope you found this helpful, and if you did, feel free to like this video. In the description box, you'll find some links to the tools and the burrs that I've used for this particular piece. Thanks for watching.